Good morning, church. I am Pastor Scott Masters, and I am super excited that you've joined us for this online offering. Now, if this is the first time you've discovered our channel, I serve a pair of communities in southwestern New Hampshire. And this offering and offerings like this are one of the tools we use and we've been using for almost a decade to spread our message of faith to as many people as we can. Now, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with us, we are one of the oldest Methodist communities in the country and the oldest in the state of New Hampshire. Methodism is a movement that took root in the 1700s and changed the landscape of faith across the globe and certainly across America. In a nutshell, we believe that we are called to be people who center their faith journey in grace and who recognize that we cannot be personally holy without being socially holy. We believe that there's a place for everyone in our faith, and hopefully these offerings are one more way for you to learn about the invitation that comes with the United Methodist Church. And although we have taken a brief hiatus for some time in these offerings, our hope is to slowly return to offering these messages as frequently as possible. It's our hope that these messages not only grow your connection with us, but plant a seed for you to find a church in the area in which you live or to make the leap to join us in person. Now, that said, as our internet congregation continues to grow, we encourage you to reach out with any questions, prayer requests, or comments. At the tail end of this video, there will be details on how you can reach our church or me directly and confidentially. Lastly, we will hope you'll subscribe to this page and spread the news of our ministry. Share the link to this page. Now, ultimately, it's our hope to just get the good news, the story of liberation, renewal, rebirth, and this brand of faith that is at the heart of Jesus' teaching to as many people who need to hear it. So again, I'm thankful that you've joined us this morning. And today we'll talk about the hope that is starting to stir in the greater United Methodist movement. But more importantly, our call to go forth and preach the good news. And I pray that this message resonates with you. Thank you again. From Matthew. Jesus went through all the towns and villages. He taught in their synagogues. He preached the good news of the kingdom, and he healed every illness and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he felt deep concern for them. They were treated badly and were helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "The harvest is huge, but there are only a few workers. So ask the Lord of the harvest to send workers out into his harvest field." Jesus called for his 12 disciples to come to him, and he gave them the authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every illness and sickness. Here are the names of the 12 apostles. First, there was Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. Then came James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Next were Philip and Bartholomew, and also Thomas and Matthew the tax collector. Two more were James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. And the last were Simon the Zealot and Judas Iscariot. And Judas was the one who was later going to hand Jesus over to his enemies. Jesus sent these 12 out with the following orders. "Do not go among the Gentiles," he said. "Do not enter any town of the Samaritans. Instead, go to the people of Israel. They are like sheep that have become lost. As you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal those who are sick. Bring those who are dead back to life. Make those who have skin diseases clean again. Drive out demons. You have received freely, so give freely." This is the word of the Lord. In the United Methodist Church, the largest mainline Protestant congregation in the United States and the tradition into which I serve. When midsummer hits, so does what we call annual conference season. Last week, Methodists from 6 New England states, roughly 1,000 of us, descended upon Manchester, New Hampshire, where we met for business and worship and renewal and connection. And for those who might not have had the joy of the annual conference experience, what it is and what it should be is often far apart. What we see is part blessing and part curse. Now, one of the core attributes and even treasures of the Wesleyan or Methodist brand of faith is our connection. In our faith, at the heart of all we do, from mission to ministry to the general administration of our church, there lies this precious covenant that makes us unique among all faith traditions. This covenantal relationship exists among individual churches and states and districts in all regions and all of our governing bodies. And it's intended to reflect this mutual accountability that we share with each other, and we share with the generations that came before us and the generations that will come. And what we call an annual conference is the basic form of that connection. Sometimes it has marked us as ineffective or challenged, but ultimately it is what marks us as Methodists, and we've been doing it since the 1700s. In connection, there are rules and standards and for everything from clergy accountability to the financial governance of our church. There's this sacred trust and responsibility that embraces our worship and our education and our life together. So there's a real power in that connection. In the spirit and the promise of that connection, a smaller church like the ones I serve can partner with larger churches or other churches and have a direct impact on the kingdom of God across the planet. Now, consider this pastor. I serve 2 communities in the southwest corner of New Hampshire. I was able to meet a group of individuals last week who are designing resources, policies, and methods for support of mission and ministries across the globe. And as their voice, these small communities drive a good deal of the conversation on where our focus will be as a region and work to influence the greater denomination. These small communities become present in the 30,000 plus churches in our denomination. Now, sadly, there are times when our commitment to that connection breaks down. And in a nutshell, that's where the United Methodist Church is stumbling today. And without getting into the nuts and bolts as to why, and without intending to lead us down a pathway of theological, political, or social debate, our connection has broken, ultimately on the matter of human sexuality. And this is not so much unlike so many denominations today. Now, for us, last week, 14 churches in New England disaffiliated from the denomination because of this debate. More or less, they decided to buy their way out of the denomination in hopes that they could find a way forward beyond the fighting. And I think the total right now between this year and last has been 8 churches from the liberal end of the spectrum and 11 from the conservative side that have chosen to go their own way. So as a witness to all of this, it was hard to watch the hurt of our brothers and sisters in faith. Now, be it the hurt of those leaving who feel like there's no longer a place for them in the United Methodist Church, or those who had to listen to the parting speeches that were offered with more judgment than grace on the way out. Now, with a bit of candidness, I have my own personal beliefs theologically, socially, and politically when it comes to these types of issues. And if you know me, you can easily figure them out after some time. But ultimately, they are mine. At the same time, I believe that my role in the churches I serve requires that I leave them at home as much as I can. Deep to my core, I believe that as a missionary pastor to community churches, I am called to reside at the messy center for the sake of the people within my community. Now, what does that mean? To live in the messy center is to acknowledge that churches by default are not homogenous. They are not one-size-fits-all places. Instead, we are made up of people who see the world differently. We are this potpourri of people with different stories and different journeys and different struggles. And I've always kind of liked the analogy of a can of mixed nuts, but sometimes that hits way too close to home. Finding that middle messy space hasn't always been my approach. Early on in my ministry, I believed it was up to me to change the world. For if I was right, it became a holy crusade for me to have the rest of the world think and be just like me. And sadly, I was more aggressive than I should have been. And I'm sure that I turned off people along the way. And for that, I am certainly sorry, and I carry some shame, but I give thanks for the gift of maturity. And hopefully today, I'm aging like fine wine rather than like whole milk. I think I've come to see the middle as where the work needs to be done. I used to believe that there was something wishy-washy about claiming that space. But today I disagree. Instead, I think it's scary. And I think it requires courage. I know it requires sacrifice. In the messy middle, both sides of the fight find a common enemy in you. Now, as my faith has matured, I've come to believe that I'm called to preach and teach a way that centers our life in a faith in Jesus Christ. Because ultimately, Jesus Christ has done the hard work of redemption already, a work that we could never hope to do for ourselves. And in doing so, Jesus became this supreme example of what love looks like. And I believe that I'm called to help the communities I serve see just that and help guide them towards that place where they can accept that grace, that love, that forgiveness, that unconditional love in a way that transforms every aspect of their life and that will have a trickle-down effect on the communities in which we navigate. And I believe that the tools of this journey are not only a deep love and respect and engagement of Scripture, but also a sacrificial commitment to expressing that love and that invitation to a wider community. Ours is to introduce the world to the love of God and allow God to do the heavy lifting of changing hearts if those hearts need to be changed. As a church and as a people of faith, we need to be careful that when we stake our claim on that middle way, that it's about setting the table rather than cooking the meal. It's remembering it's the Lord's table and the Lord's rules. And we have to recognize that we are to provide the circle in which the stranger can enter and discern for themselves. We need to be intentional about putting another chair at the table. We are to provide the means, the resources, the context, and the community in which hard questions, life-changing questions can be asked and answers sought out. And we have to destroy the barriers that keep people out. We are to be that place that anyone can walk through our doors and find hope, find a partner, find a place, find love that will not judge or condemn, but love them as our only goal. And if they see that love first and foremost, if they see what we are rather than what we are against, if we meet them where they are at, only then will they have the opportunity for a real journey to start. And that call requires us to stand face to face with the hurts that we cast on others that don't feel, think, or act like us. We can't be just another source of one more hurt. We have to choose love and choose love alone. And this is where the hard work comes in. We are a people with passions. We are people with convictions. Yet we live in a society where no space is provided for those who disagree. We want to be right. And it's hard to know when the first choice is to bite our lip and listen. But it's even harder, nearly impossible, to keep our mouths closed when we are certain. And it's hard to trust God when we meet those that we disagree with. We want to see our God as one who believes like we do, who would vote like we do, who would buy the same brands of stuff and fight for the same things we do. We want our God to fly our flag, and we want our God to hate the same things that we hate. It's incredibly hard to make room for the other, yet everything less is a slap in the face of this love. Now, as these statements hover just above the surface of this message, I want to share a truth with you. On Thursday, while manning a resource table at the aforementioned annual conference, a deeply broken and wildly vitriolic televangelist died, without providing a pulpit for his venom or to even offer his name in any of the sacred spaces that I find myself in. The truth is, his teachings often led to more hate and contempt than it did to grace and holiness. This pastor and preacher was perhaps the most vitriolic and ignorant of talking heads that I've seen over the last 100 years. And although he built an incredible mission and ministry which has performed so much good and had the potential to give so much more, he also crafted an ugly faith that just got uglier and uglier over time. And as such, he was wildly hated at the time of his death. So, as I sat at a table with resources for global missions during the aforementioned conference, I saw a leader of the church, and a leader with a huge voice, and a leader that could be a change agent in our denomination. And I watched from a distance as she learned that he died. She was so incredibly excited. She audibly cheered. And she even had a small dance right there. And although I understand her gut response, I was and am deeply saddened that a leader of this brand of faith would celebrate death in such a way. I keep thinking on this moment because it isn't easy for me. It's messy. I struggle because on one side, I know that teenagers are killing themselves over issues of their identity. And the church owns that. Those that spew the ugliness deserve more responsibility than others. In a way, that celebration seems a bit karmic. But at the same time, this is also our responsibility. This ugliness, whether we see it right here or only on television, is a sign of our failure as a body of Christ. Because hate breeds hate. Judgment breeds judgment. 1 Corinthians 13 says love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love breeds love. The fact that the broken so often offer a louder voice than us is on us. And to dance at the demise is to surrender our collective accountability for a world that creates that form of faith. I started to catch a glimpse that maybe there's a new way that we can become Wesleyan again. Maybe we can find ourselves back in that messy middle where we can talk about the challenge to be both about grace and holiness and evangelism and social justice. We can hold a love of Scripture and a love of scholarship and criticism. We can be a faith that embraces an intellect and a heart. The messy way is the Methodist way, whether we like it or not. I think it's time to claim that again. We have to move beyond the anger of either side. And as I've been digesting this all, I found myself in the lectionary reading for this Sunday. And although it's only a couple of sentences, I hear it as the roadmap of just who we are supposed to be. And I hope this is who we can truly become. In this reading, we see Jesus doing what Jesus always does, jumping from town to city, healing the sick, teaching in synagogues, and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. Yet the lesson for us as occurs, or the lesson that I want us to hold on to occurs as he sends his followers out to do the very same thing, to cure the sick, to raise the dead, to cleanse the lepers, to cast out demons. He tells his followers that people are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He tells them that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. He tells his disciples to ask the Lord of the harvest to send more laborers. It's no longer okay for them to remain as students, followers, or disciples. It's time to become apostles, those that are sent out. I have to believe that this is our time too. That has to be the hope of the church. We need to finally stop talking and start doing. The roadmap that this passage lays out isn't complex at all. It's simple. And because it is, there are no excuses. As we sit in this story, in this commission, I pray that you'll remember three things. First, Jesus names those he sends out, and these people might be familiar in character. He sends Peter, the disciple who's so often impetuous and acts without thinking. He sends James and John, the sons of thunder, a nickname which speaks to their boldness and aggressive and perhaps their drama queen way of navigating the world. There was James of Ephesus, who tradition has it was disabled and could barely walk. There was Thaddeus, a disciple that is called by numerous names in the Bible, virtually unmentioned in deed, and whose name might just be a nickname similar to man-child. Simon the Zealot was sent. He was said to be an over-the-top revolutionary. There was Thomas, brave to a fault, but the eternal symbol of doubt for 2,000 years. And finally, he sends Judas, the apostle who would eventually kick off the chain of events which would lead to Jesus' very death. Jesus doesn't send the richest, the strongest, or the most likely. Jesus sends the ragtag bunch of imperfectly perfect people. He doesn't send people who have figured it all out. He doesn't care if it's next to impossible to tell our flaws from our gifts. He doesn't care if the world remembers your name. He doesn't want us to wait until our hip stops hurting or to tell ourselves that we are too old, too young, or not enough. He says, go. Go, for the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Second, and although it really doesn't say as much in this passage, other gospels tell us that Jesus sends them out with next to nothing. They are sent with no staff, no bag, no bread, no money, and not even a change of clothes. Jesus didn't send the people from the big sanctuaries with big budgets. They were not seminarians. They were not eloquent speakers. And they didn't have any glitz and glamour. They were everyday, normal people, sent to do something incredible and extraordinary. People like you and me. He doesn't wait until we have the perfect size bank accounts or 401ks and we're fully prepped and prepared. He says, go. Go, for the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Finally, he tells those disciples not to go out among the Gentiles. That's not quite the time. He says, stay and preach to the Jews. He tells those disciples and us that we are to start now and to start from where we are at. You are called out to serve where you are. That's where you start. You can have some incredible dreams for the second chapter, but today you need to start. He says there's work to do right now, right here. And perhaps that's the most important reminder of the three. The work that we need to do. The work needs to be the work of the United Methodist Church and people of faith. The work that this church needs starts here. We are to open our front door and go. We can't make it more complicated than that, or we will never get started. It's simple. It's cut and dry. We are told to go. Go make disciples. Go change the world. Go, for the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So after coming home from this messy adventure of being the United Methodist Church, I have a prayer that I'm offering deep down in my gut. I pray that we can be bigger. I pray that we can be better than the last 20 years have hinted at. I pray that our table can be bigger. I pray that when the seeker looks at us, they don't see the face of hate staring back. I pray that we can truly be about inclusion, invitation. I pray that all the garbage that the world fights apart can be left out in the hallways of our church. And in the sanctuaries, we can be about the worship and love of God. I pray that our communities can be about service and hope and love in the same type of radical fullness that was expressed in our gospel. I think about those churches that have left us, who have said goodbye to the United Methodist Way. I pray that they can find a way to move beyond these struggles. But I also pray that those of us who remain can find a way to hold on to the brothers and sisters who are seeking on both sides of the spectrum, and find a way back to the messy center, especially for the countless children, people who need us to truly be the church. Thank you again for watching this message. Hopefully you know that you are invited to share in God's love from precisely where you are at. Thanks, Peter.